We're in a three-part series of my journey to getting to where I am today. So in the first part, I covered sort of my upbringing, my schooling, the lessons, how I ultimately got to the CIA. My part two was all about my experience at the government, the work I did, the lessons I learned. Now part three is all about post-government. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome, 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 welcome. What the heck? Let's throw in a few more welcomes. Welcome, 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 welcome. Boom, boom, boom. You know what time it is, my friends. It is time for Life of a CISO with yours truly. The good doctor is in the house. I am fired up. I am ready to go. We are in the middle of a three-part series. I think I'm going to wrap it up here, but we might go into part four. You never know. So just so you know, we're in a three-part series of my journey to getting to where I am today. So in the first part, I covered sort of my upbringing, my schooling, the lessons, how I ultimately got to the CIA. My part two was all about my experience at the government, the work I did, the lessons I learned. Now part three is all about post-government. What I did afterwards, my entrepreneurial journey, my lessons, my excitement, my fun, my joy. But before we get into that, before we get into part three of my amazing journey, I always like throwing a little motivation at you. If you've been following me online, following my different podcasts, you know I'm in this transformational kick. I'm in the middle of a pretty massive transformation in my life in terms of truly shifting and changing my identity. I love, people call it many different things. They call it a rebirth, right? They call it an identity change. I love it. People that don't understand this work and realize it's all about growing and expanding, call it a midlife crisis, right? All sorts of fun things. But to me, we have so much potential. Actually, we have limitless potential. We are truly limitless. The only thing we do throughout our lives is we put limits on it. We're born, and when we're born, we are limitless. There is nothing we are not capable of doing or achieving or accomplishing. But all with good interest, all with good intent, parents, teachers, and those who raise us want to protect us. They want to keep us safe. So they start putting beliefs on us that limit us to try to protect us and keep us safe. And that's good. Because what is your primary job when you're born? Your primary job when you're born is survival. So anything that can help you survive and help you get to where you are is a really good thing. Now, congratulations. If you are listening to this, you have so far mastered the art of survival. You're alive. Congratulations. You have mastered that skill. My question to you is, since you've mastered the skill of survival, are you ready? Are you ready to master the skill of thriving? Because that's what comes after survival. Once you've learned how to survive, once you've learned how to get all your basic needs met, now we can move from needs to wants. Now it's not just about what we need, it's what do you really want? And that's shifting from surviving to thriving. But guess what? It requires a whole new set of beliefs. It requires a whole new identity. Because the current version of you that's operating today has created the current life that you have. It's great. The current life that you have is amazing. And if you just want to stay at that current level, that's great. But I'm all about exponential growth. I'm all about world class. I'm all about living the life of your dreams and tapping into your full, utmost potential, which means it's time for you to transform. It's time for you to create a new identity. It's time for you to be rebirthed and switch from surviving to thriving. So you have to start deciding what you really want and who you want to become. And you know, I love my stories and I love my analogies. So this was one that I read recently and it fascinates me. If you look at nature, nature is all about the perfect balance of surviving and thriving. We talked about the lobster in part 2. Now I want to talk about the eagle. Eagles are an interesting species. When eagles get to about 40 years old, they have a very interesting decision to make. Because at 40 years old, their internal is still very healthy. They could live for another 30 to 40 years. But here's the problem. Their beaks are very dull. Their claws are no longer sharp. And their wings are very thick and heavy. So they really can't fly very fast. Which means eagles are predators. Eagles are hunters. And if you can't hunt anymore because your claws are not sharp and your wings are not strong and your beak is not powerful enough, you're not going to be able to survive. So eagles have a very interesting decision to make when they get to this point of their life. They can either recognize they had a good life and die, and some eagles do. There's some eagles that at age of 40, they pass away because they basically recognize that they've lived their life and they're done. However, there's other eagles that recognize if they can go in and basically rebirth, get new beaks, new claws, and new wings, they can live another 30 years because their hearts and all their other components are strong enough. They just need to become or transform back into a new version. So what some eagles do is they fly high into the mountains, find a safe location, and they proceed every day to bang their beak against the rock. They continually do this until finally a very painful process occurs where their beak falls out. And what do you think happens? A brand new sharp beak, just like they had when they were younger, goes back in its place. Then it proceeds to take the new beak and rip out all its old, dull claws, and then brand new sharp claws grow back in its place. It then takes those sharp claws and proceeds to rip out all of the old, thick wings that doesn't allow it to fly. And you guessed it, what happens? Brand new wings grow back. So this takes about 90 days to do, but now the eagle is transformed. The eagle now has a brand new beak, brand new sharp claws, brand new wings, and now can hunt, fly easily, thrive, and live another 30 plus years. But it had to make that decision to endure that painful process of transformation to become a new version of itself. So the question is, are you ready to transform? You have the capability to become a new version. You have the capability to become a new identity. But you have to decide, are you willing to accept this current life as this is all there is? This is your current life, the current income, the current neighborhood, the current houses, the current friends. That's going to be your life for the next 30 years. Or do you know deep in your heart that there's so much more? That there's exponential growth that you can achieve, but you have to be willing to get rid of those old beliefs. You have to be willing to get rid of that old identity. You have to be willing to get rid of those old values and transform into a new version of you. And all I can tell you is, if an eagle can do it, so can you. And I know this podcast, I always love throwing some motivation. I always love helping you. But I also have another podcast called Bulletproof Cyber with Dr. Eric Cole. If you haven't checked it out, you definitely should. This podcast, I throw a little mindset, but a lot more on the career and the CISO. That one's all about mindset. So if you find this stuff interesting, or you think I'm nuts and you want to find out more, check out Bulletproof Cyber with Eric Cole. Otherwise, let's jump back to the task at hand, which is Dr. Cole's journey to becoming a Chief Information Security Officer. So I leave the agency in the middle of a .com, and I decide to do what most folks would do, which is go to a large telecom, a large company, and become their security officer. So essentially, I went and worked for a large telecommunication company and was their security officer. Now, this was at the time where Chief Information Officer, CIOs, was a brand new title. Brand new title that was just starting to come to fruition, just starting to happen, where they realized the importance and criticality of information technology to a business. So a brand new field. So there was no such thing as a CISO. The idea of having a Chief Information Security Officer was not something that any company thought of, because they were still getting their arms around information technology and didn't understand the importance of cybersecurity. So I was essentially a CISO without the title, because it didn't exist. So I was the Information Security Officer, the top person in charge of cybersecurity for the entire organization. So I went in and started implementing and rolling out security, working with IT, integrating within the environment. And then, of course, what happened? I love you, Melissa, right? All those viruses, and all of a sudden, the organization was woken up to just how important and how critical cybersecurity was, and just how fragile they were to the organization. Now, I was one of the few folks that actually survived that. Typically, what happens when there's a major cybersecurity event, a breach, a virus, a worm, what does the company normally do? They normally fire the security officer, because they assume that the metric is no breaches. They assume they're supposed to be 100% secure, so when a breach happens, they think the CISO failed. I had hindsight, and when I took the job, I made it very clear during the interview process, 100% security doesn't exist. So if you are expecting me to completely secure the organization, I can't, because the only way to do that would be to remove all functionality. And I remember sitting with the CEO during the interview process, and I showed him my basic charts that I still use today. 100% security equals zero functionality. As soon as you add functionality, you reduce security. As soon as you add functionality, you increase risk. So I said, if you want to have a highly functional organization, and especially have rapid growth within the industry, then we need to take some risks. They'll be calculated, but I will tell you right now, we will have some breaches. So if you want to naively think you'll have no breaches, and you have security officers that are telling you you'll be 100% secure, they're lying to you, they're misleading you, and they're going to get you into trouble. So if you want the truth, if you want honesty, and you want me to come in and build out a robust program where we will have breaches, but we'll recover within a timely manner, then I'm the person. I remember the CEO telling me, you were the only person that cared more about the truth than getting the job. He goes, Eric, everyone else I interviewed just wanted the job and was telling me how they'd make us so secure, we'd never have breaches, and it just didn't feel right to me. You cared more about telling me the truth, and if I didn't hire you, you were okay with that, which meant he did hire me. So one of the most important things, always tell the truth. Always be honest, always be upfront, and when you're engaging early on with the company, make sure they realize 100% security is a fallacy, there will be breaches, and cybersecurity is all about timely detection and minimizing damage, response and controlling the damage. So when Melissa and I Love You hit, we responded, we had IR in place, we worked with IT, and we recovered very nicely from those incidents. But I still remember the conversation with the CIO. After I Love You hit and we just got done with an executive briefing, we haven't slept for a couple days, we were super tired, and we said, let's go get a cup of coffee and wrap this thing up. And he looked at me and goes, Eric, what do you think the future looks like? And I said, very, very terrifying, and here's why. There was not a single person who clicked on those links that knew it wasn't legit. Not a single person thought it was legit. Because guess what? What kind of screwed up organization do you work for that people send I love you messages to each other? If you walk into work and there's an I love you message, the title of the message says, I love you. Here's a message of love, and it's from your coworker. Either you need psychological help or you knew it was not legit. That is not normal behavior. So everyone who clicked on it knew it wasn't legit. They knew something was going on, but they clicked on it anyway. And I looked at him and said, what happens when the message is legit? What happens when the message says, here's the presentation you requested? What happens when the message says, here's the invoice you wanted? What happens if it says, your package has been delayed? And that's where we are today. We no longer live in a phase where it's obvious and clear that it's malicious. Today, the messages look legit. So that's where I began. But I learned a very valuable business lesson. At the telecom, when you do security or you do IT, you're an overhead function, which meant my budget was based on how well the company did. If the company did very well, I got a good budget. If the company had a bad year, I got a low budget. Well, here's the problem. Cybersecurity doesn't vary. Cybersecurity doesn't change. So I realized being an overhead function in an organization, you don't control your own destiny. You are at the mercy of other factors that you don't control that can negatively impact your ability to do your job, negatively impact your ability to hire, or even cause you to have to fire employees, even though you're doing everything correctly. So as this company went through its normal ups and downs and I learned the impact of being overhead, I said, no, 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 no. Silly rabbit, tricks are for kids. I'm not doing this. I want to control my own destiny. But I also knew that I was fairly new to business and didn't know everything. So I teamed up with several other executives to a company called TSGI, the Cytex Group Inc., and was their chief technology officer. So I was responsible for building out intellectual property and advancing technology for our customers. We were a government contractor, and so we were putting together patents, doing research, doing journals, getting the company well known in being an innovative leader in that space. And then eventually sold the company to Lockheed Martin. Now, learned a couple valuable lessons. We were making significant amount of money, several hundred millions of dollars, but our margins were single digits. So yes, the company was making a ton of money, but before we sold, we weren't making big salaries because 6% margins, there's not a lot to go around. So margins and profitability are more important than revenue. That's why today when you see me do business masterminds or do hot seats with business owners, I'm like, stop. I don't want to hear about revenue and that you're a multimillionaire or you're a billionaire or all that other crap. I want to know how much money you are bringing home and putting into your bank account. What is the profitability and what is your take home cash? Because I see this all the time. Was at this business mastermind and this person's like, I'm running a $200 million company. And the first thing I'm thinking of is, if that is actually true, why are you here? And then I started asking some questions and I'm like, you drive a 7-year-old Honda, you live in a 200K house. Something's not adding up. How much do you make a year? He goes, well, I make $200K a year. I said, great. What is the profitability of your company? Oh, we just got third round funding and we're still operating in the red. I said, dude, stop lying. You don't have a $200 million company. You have an entity that is losing money and you are a 200K net worth. That's the reality. That is the reality. Now, maybe you can, maybe you can't sell, but don't go in and tell people you're worth $200 million when you're bringing home 200K. You need to focus on profitability and margins. So I learned that lesson the hard way. Huge, huge, huge. Other lesson I learned is valuation of a company. I didn't realize what I was doing, but getting patents, getting the company known as an innovative technology, going to trade shows and getting the name known. So everyone's like, when we think innovation, we think TSGI. That increased the valuation of the company. Because normally a company that has short-term government contracts with 6% profitability maybe gets a half X multiplier. So that means if you're a $400 million company, maybe they'll buy you for 150 or 200 mil because there's not any value to it. But by doing these things of patentability and branding and everything else, we were able to get up to at least a 1X valuation. So I learned a good lesson in margins and profitability, and I learned a really good lesson in valuation. And that's what I specialize in today. My companies that I build and sell have lower revenue than most, but my profitability and valuation are through the roof. So typically my companies have lower revenue, but typically have 80% margins or profitability, and often will sell for 7 to 9 times the revenue. So that's my focus in business, is valuation and profitability of what goes in your pocket, not bragging about a big revenue number that really is artificial and doesn't really show the true value of the business. So then, normally when you sell a company, you go in and exit. You take the package. But there was a brand new CEO, Bob Stevens. Cybersecurity was one of his hot areas, and that was my specialty. So he actually asked if I'd stay on as a senior fellow or chief scientist to help advise and direct the cybersecurity across the company. So once again, gave me great experience in different areas. When there was the issue where the foreign adversary broke into the Joint Strike Fighter, I was leading in, heading up that incident response team whenever there were security issues or challenges. So I was able to get a ton of experience across lots of different areas and expertise. And I was doing well, enjoying life, but it was one that after 4 years, I realized that I yes, I did really well in that exit, and it exponentially increased my life. But then for the last 4 years, it pretty much was staying around the same. So I'm like, I want to expand and grow. There's so much more I want to do. So as coincidence will happen, I started meeting and talking to people, and I ran across Dave DeWalt. You might know him in the space. He was with McAfee. He did FireEye, a lot of these big, he's a big tech. See, he was really good at growing and selling big tech companies. So I met up with Dave DeWalt, John McAfee, and at the time, McAfee was struggling in the competitive market. There was lots of competition, both nationally and internationally. You had all these new companies coming up, Kaspersky, Trend Micro, Sophos, and everyone else, and they were just tearing them apart in the market. So they needed somebody to come in and basically work with customers and reevaluate their technology. So I came in as the CTO, helped rebrand, rebuild, revive, really work closely with customers on what do they really want and what's really important in cyber. And once again, learned a valuable lesson. It's not what is cool, and it's not what you think it's cool. It's what do your customers want, and can you solve it better than anyone else? If you want to make money, grow a company, or expand a business, it's really simple. Find a customer need that has a big enough pain that they're willing to pay for somebody to solve it, and solve it better than anybody else. Business 101, 201, 301, 401. You don't got to go to business school. It's really that simple. You got to find a critical pain point that's painful enough they're willing to pay for and solve it better than anybody else. So that's what we ultimately did. We then was able to sell that company to Intel. And then in that case, I did take the exit and was also then going in and running my own company, Secure Anchor, which I've been doing for the last many years. But there's also an important parallel path. This is great. Getting known, building brand, building wealth are important. But you also have to make sure you do what you love. I love to help people. I love to teach people. So during this entire time, I also got introduced to two wonderful people, Alan Paller and Stephen Northcutt, that had this small training company called SANS, and I had the honor and privilege of working with them to be able to grow out the cyber defense curriculum. So I wrote Security Essentials, Security Defender. At least while I was there for 15 years, Security Essentials was the #1 top selling course. I was teaching it anywhere from 10 to 15 times a year, and I just loved being in the classroom, loved helping people, loved expanding knowledge, and that's still what I'm doing today. So it's important to build business, build wealth, but you also want to focus in on what you really love to do. And that's what I'm moving more and more. That's why I do these podcasts for free. Trust me, these podcasts take a lot of work, a lot of energy, a lot of effort, social media, a lot of work, a lot of energy, a lot of effort. I don't get paid for it, but I tell you, I am not happier than being in here because I love helping and sharing knowledge. So it's also important as you continue your journey to find people that want to help others, to find people that want to expand knowledge or whatever it is you love. You might not love helping people. Nothing wrong with that, right? You might not love teaching. Some people don't like teaching. Some people don't like being on stage, but I believe that's my superpower, that I can take very technical terms and explain them in non-technical ways so people can understand. That's why I was so great in the classroom. That's why I'm so great in the courtroom. That's why I'm so great in the boardroom. So you need to also identify your superpower. What is it that you do better than anybody else that to you is just natural, easy, and fun? And to me, teaching, explaining, and helping people understand technology and cybersecurity is my superpower. So I hope my journey helped incite you, give you some tips and tricks, give you some encouragement to pursue your dreams at all costs, and ultimately figure out what you love to do, figure out what your superpower is, and then do everything you can to utilize that superpower. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Life of CISO. We'll see you next week.